When we think about the theme of our section, we decided that we need to combine the religion and technology, and we propose the theme of our session like religion in the Ukrainian information space from Soviet bans to perceived freedom. And at first, our very, very common summaries about this theme. After decades of totalitarian bans of the presence of religion in society, and therefore its presence in informational space, a new age has come for its activity development by religious organization. Now the Ukrainian informational religious space is in the process of formation, and it is somewhat chaotic and extremely politicized, but in the same time very saturated. And I propose to tell about this situation because I have a plan to show you the societal, government, and public strategy for the development of the information space of Ukraine and give you the general approaches, focusing on religion. At first, some historical remarks. During the Soviet time, the Ukrainian information space experienced double pressure for any national and religious intentions. The USSR, with its maniacal idea and practice of building a non or even anti-national and non-religious society, leveled the natural ethnic and spiritual development of the people. For all our history, we, in our relation with Russian, we have the eternal Ukrainian question. So-called Ukrainian separatism is that red rag that has always annoyed the Russians. Since the time of Prince Andrei Bogolyubsky, he was a Rus prince because he ruled the Rus territory, the Suzdal and Volodymyr, and he destroyed Kiev in 1169. And even to nowadays, this horde will not come down in any way because we are not allowed to live better than the Russians. Always, everything Ukrainian, language, culture, history, religion, etc., was declared secondary to the great Russian culture, derivative and insignificant compared to the tremendous imperial history. Religion was considered a phenomenon that needed to be overcome. The religious institutions and their believers were criticized, humiliated, exposed, and even labeled. Allowing the minimal presence of religion in the information space of Ukraine, the Soviet authorities clearly indicated which religion was desirable for presentation. And it was only the Russian Orthodox Church was allowed to play such a role. The level, quality, scope, and content of such presence were determinant in Communist Party offices in Moscow. That's why Soviet people in general had almost nothing about religion. About the church, it was a forbidden topic. The taboo on it was particularly lifted in 1988 when the Soviet Union celebrated the 1000th anniversary of the baptism of Rus. That time, there was the only one religious magazine in Ukraine, Pravoslavny Vestnik, the Orthodox Herald. This publish was a pitiful copy of the All Union Journal of the Moscow Patriarchate. And what this journal and magazine showed us, this Orthodox Herald was about the life of Ukrainian exarchate of Russian Orthodox Church. The magazine had little information and was boring, providing information about the pastoral visits of Metropolitan Filaret as the ruling exarch to various regions of Ukraine and his sermons of the different holidays. In addition to the All Union journal, which told about the life of Orthodox Church, not about the believers, not about the ordinary life of Orthodox people. The Orthodox Almanac, Bogoslovsky Trudy, the theological works, was published in USSR from 1959 under auspices of a Russian Orthodox Church, which published work of theologians, translations from other languages, works of churches, father, well-known thinkers, and so on. Very theoretical journal. Nothing about the ordinary life or maybe some problems in religious life in the country were not discussed on the pages of this almanac. The Soviet authorities, for some reason, I don't know why, allowed the Baptists to publish the magazine Baptist until 1929, and Bratski Vestnik, which excited from 1944 to 1992. It was restored in 2005, but already as a Russian religious magazine of the Euro-Asian Federation of Union of Evangelical Christian Baptists. There was in that time a magazine, Muslims in the Soviet East, and that's it, for 260 million inhabitants of the USSR. As we know, the religious information space was strictly controlled and depended on Communist Party and Soviet government. Everything was censored by the ideological department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Soviet Union. The situation was slightly different in Ukrainian territories, where we are not part of the USSR till 40s. Many religious literatures and periodicals were published in Galicia, Bukovina, Zakarpattia. But with the accession of this land to USSR, the Soviet authorities quickly covered up everything. And after the Lviv pseudo council of 1946, when the Greek Catholic were forcefully poured into the Russian Orthodox Church, they also cleaned up the informational space of these regions. In Soviet time, the informational space was filled with anti-religious information. A lot of atheistic literature was published. Systematic anti-religious information campaigns among believers were conducted. That is, on the year of the collapse of USSR in 1991 and the emergence of independent Ukraine as a state, the information space was denationalized and atheized. In 1991, Ukraine was born, and a new period appeared in our history. Religion in Ukraine returned to public life. Its actual and formal rehabilitation took place, and religious network began to develop. And that time appeared several important questions to society, to state, and to church. Should and how should religion be represented in the informational space of Ukraine? Who determines the level, quality, scale, content of this presence? How fully and objectively is religion presented today in secular and religious information resources? Which religions are the most successful in the age of informational boom? How does a religion use the informational possibilities of informative society? How did certain religions and churches react to the technological revolution, the internet, new forms of communication, criticized, ignored, or actively implemented? What technologies are most in demand by churches and Ukrainian society? Have Ukrainian churches created their own information resources. There is a need for the adequate presentation of religion and the church in the informational space of Ukraine. Ukrainian churches began to create their information resources. Despite the information gateways open since 1991, the internal censorship developed in Soviet time will operate it and puts pressure on the Ukrainian information space till now. Therefore, we would like to stress, in Ukraine, there is still no religious information space corresponding to the needs of the time due to remnants of the Soviet tradition, of the negative attitude towards religion, which even after 32 years of our independence has not been completely overcome. The second, informed public demands for such information, interests in secular scandals is higher than the need for spiritual life. And the third, the passivity and inability of many religious organizations to create and disseminate information about itself. As a result, Ukrainian society is poorly informed in religious matters, poorly educated, and because of this, even aggressive towards religion, the church, priests, and believers. It has a poor understanding of religion, the foundations of faith, and the religious environment itself, feeds on ancient stereotypes, does not want to know the truth about history, condemns their faith, is very, very intolerant. Both religious organizations, society, educators, and scientists felt the lack of true information about religion at first, and everyone tried to overcome these shortcomings in their own way. Almost at the same time, various religious organizations realized their need to create their own information media, to open their own newspapers and magazine, internet pages, and so on. I think that TV program, and we will discuss this later. I know that Maxim, he has good information about how it appeared in his church. I have the list, short list of the history of this real media situation. I think that the most active and successful in that time, two churches were the Orthodox Church and the Greek Catholic Church. But maybe later, the beginning of the 2000, another church decided that they need a special newspapers and magazines, and became to share this information. What about the secular mass media? This is disaster. The topic of religion is very unpopular even now. They are only interested in some scandals around the church. There is no systematic approach, and only thanks to individual journalists such as Clara Hudzik, who worked in newspaper then, or Katerina Shotkina from newspaper Zerkalo Tizhnya. She covered society's need for objective information. And most of secular mass media is knowledgeable in the religious sphere, often wrote obvious nonsense, untruths, made commissioned materials. I have all these materials in my archive. Especially suffer from this secular mass media, Protestant and new religious movement, because our secular mass media decided that this is very strong sectarians, especially Jehovah's Witnesses, and for a long time we battle with such approaches to this sector of religious life. In our opinion, religion is not sufficiently, fully and objectively represented in secular and religious information resources. Its confessional involvement or traditional godless criticism is felt when the necessity of religion is denied and even vulgar and anti-clericalism is cultivated. But now in Ukraine, we have more than 500 religious periodicals of Ukraine. For a long time, religious media exclusively covered only internal informational needs of religious communities. The secular information space showed little interest in religious topics. However, the politicization of modern life, especially the Russian-Ukrainian war, has actualized the religious theme, which is becoming especially requested by Ukrainian society. Ukrainians are interested in the topics such as the emergence of an independent church and the granting by the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Thomas on autocephaly to the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, the reactions of various religious organizations to the Russian aggression, the collaboration of some priests of Ukrainian Orthodox Church in occupied Donetsk and Lugansk territory, the propaganda of Russian world through the Russian Orthodox Church among Ukrainian believers, the special Ostpolitik of Vatican and its consequence for Ukraine, and so on are among the topics for public discussion. Not so loudly, but now I think that the most important and the most popular theme for discussing is the decisive actions of the authorities, which are aimed at stopping the anti-state activities of certain religious organizations, in particular the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And the second, this is the speeches of the Pope Francis, in which he tolerates Russia. This is the top theme in our mass media last month. Not so loudly, but also controversial is the reaction of Protestant churches to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Not all of them consider it necessary to support Ukraine and even to serving in the armed forces. Till now, the most of Protestants prayer for peace, not for victory of our country in this war. We have some questions about the neutrality of some Muslim and Jewish communities in Ukraine about the war. The common voice of the churches and religious organizations in information space is provided by the All-Ukrainian Council of the Churches and Religious Organizations and other interconfessional associations. But confessional differences make it difficult to express a unified position. That is why Ukrainian society is so polar in its assessment of the situation with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and the Pope. One part uncoordinatedly support the church and its leaders, but other advocates the sooner the banning of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, the severing of relation not only with Moscow but also with the Vatican. The presence of different voices indicates the pluralism that is nurtured in Ukrainian society, but such radical polarity indicates the imbalance in people's attitude, which is a derivative of the society's inadequate awareness of religious matter, both of the part of the religious organizations themselves and the part of the state and society. The formation of adequate information space is complicated by purely technical problems, but there are also humanitarian challenges. Now, about among the technical problems is the lack of appropriate information infrastructure, limitation of the information resource and the computer media, the organizational measure, even, for example, the legal norms, and many, many others. But among the humanitarian groups, the main, for me, the inability of the society to formulate the appropriate, questionable religious objective information, and the weakness of the same society, in particular in the religious sector, to give an adequate answer. In the mid of 2000, the Information Society Development Strategy in our country was developed as a state program, because, on my opinion, Ukraine has no such general strategy, and we needed this strategy. Even the law of Ukraine on the basic principle of informational society development in Ukraine was adopted and is being particularly implemented. We have a great aim in this the strategy, this state program. For example, formation of favorable conditions for the development of an informational society, so economical, political, and cultural development of a country with a market economy, and so on. But I very, very deeply to read this program, and unfortunately, I could not find here how is the church involved in the building of this informational society. Where is its church place in this strategy? How does the state use the resources of the church, and how does it help to open the resources of the church? In connection with the war, the focus in the formation of the information space of Ukraine changed. Now the emphasis is on its safety. In the conditions of war, it is necessary to think about the information security. And in 2021, in Ukraine, the decree of the president of Ukraine was adopted, like a strategy of information security. The information security strategy defines current challenges and threats to the national security of Ukraine in the information sphere. But the same question is, where is the church in this situation? Where is the religion? How are the interests of the 70% of the Ukrainians who consider themselves believers protected? Where are the measures that neutralize the negative influence of the ideology of Russian world, Ruski Mir, false Christian pacifism, calls from certain churches not to go to war, not to defend their homeland from aggressor? And where is the information about the criminality of not fulfilling one's civic duty, not to mention the fact that the church directly contributed to the illegal migration of men of military age abroad? And there were about 80,000 of them. Wasn't it the churches that transported these potential soldiers to Romania, Poland, America? Where is the information about the international soldiers who are fighting on the side of Ukraine, among whom are the dead, and who have just not been awarded the order of brother for brother on the initiative of some public organization? So my conclusion is, the Ukrainian informational religious space is in the formation process. It is somewhat chaotic. I told about it, and highly politicized. Ukrainian needs a strategy to overcome the shortcoming of informing to develop of the information space of Ukraine together. The government, churches, and the civil society. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have questions, I'm ready to answer.
Not everyone at the same time. Maybe someone is could be the first. Okay, I may I start. Liudmyla, what is your understanding of the main problem today in the whether in the context of this war was the maybe the religious freedom was damaged in the first place, or is there some other urgent needs in terms of religion in Ukraine during this war? Thank you.
I'm not catch well your question because I have some problems with the sound, but as I understand, you ask about what is the dominant, religious freedom or the national security. Am I right or not?
Okay.
I think that we need, based on the document which was published by the European officers of the now I could not quickly translate into English. Built one, it called about the security, and as I remember, this document proposed to use the concrete situation in which every country is in this moment. And when we ask me about what is the main for Ukrainian now, the national or state security or religious freedom, I think that on the first place we have the national security in the situation of war. But we need to be very careful with such event, with such cases like Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and we understand that this case is very complicated to be solved in a civilizational way, because we need to respect the religious feelings and religious understanding of the Orthodox believers. And you know that the Orthodox Church, I think that Orthodox Church will continue to be on our territory. And if Ukrainian states have some questions to the church, but not for their faith, not for their belonging to the church, but for their concrete activity, which is direct against Ukrainian society and against Ukrainian state. So Ukrainian state, as I know, try to support the high level of religious freedom in our country, but and nobody suffered in this sphere, I think, because nobody banned the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And if you have several cases of those who serve to occupied power, we need to stop this activity.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm asking myself if you would say there is a kind of rise in spirituality within the Ukrainian society due to the war. Is there a kind of need and seeking for religion and spirituality because, you know, PTSD, combat stress, and those kind of coping mechanisms next to psychological aspects? Would you say there is a rise of coming closer to or the need and seek for religiosity within the society due to the war? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question, but Maxim, could you repeat for me a short version, because I could not catch very well the sounds problem.
May we use the mic on the pulpit? Will it help?
No, you can tell. I just turned the speaker. Yeah. Now it will be...
may it help right now?
Better.
So please speak slower, and because you know the connection may.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. My question is, would you say there is a rise of spirituality within the Ukrainian society due to combat stress and the war, you know, the experience from the soldiers on the front line, that they are seeking more religion to relieve the combat stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, and those kinds? Would you say there is, you can observe a rising in the seeking of religious practices and rituals?
Okay, now I hear you better, and I understand what about you ask. We have no special investigation in this sphere, but because you understand why we could not cover our, for example, all those who are suffered in this situation, but according to my feelings and the experience of my communication with all those who you remember in your question, yes, we could stress, we could fix that the religiosity in Ukrainian society became higher. And we understand why, because on front, as our soldiers and officers said, there are no non-believers on the front, on the war. You understand why. And even here, not on the front of these all events, not those who directly may be not involved in activity on the front. For example, me, like the mother of the soldiers on the front, my son, my youngest son now is in front. I could fix in my life that I address to God more often than previous time, because every day I ask God to suffer my son and to support him in this situation. This is a good idea, as I understand, to make research in this sphere, and to have a real data about this in rising of the face of current Ukraine. But now, as I understand, all our resources, all our finance, we direct to front, not to academic research, not to our even analytic work. Thank you very, very much for your idea.
May I add something? So there is a sociological survey which dating on February of this year, which shows a noticeable rise of religiosity, almost for 10%, and the social demographic group which shows it mostly is the youngest part of the age group. So, and previously, such level of religious rise was noticed in 2014. So you see the classical situation, correlation between the instability, on the, so to say, outside, and the seeking. Probably it's not always have institutionalized forms, but at least there is rise in terms of mystical thinking, in terms of seeking some rituals, in seeking some consolace and the like.